And as I'm sure you could tell, a lot of work that has gone into this symposium, alongside a whole bunch more work that is going on around the endangered whales strategy in general. And the one person that Trevor didn't thank was himself. And there's been a working group of all three parliamentary secretaries around the group and the departments, and Trevor's been leading a lot of that. So one big hand for Trevor, please, while we're I also want to begin by thanking everyone here for being such an active and engaged participant in this symposium, and for all the work that you're doing outside of this symposium, for some of you for your entire careers. I'd also like to acknowledge, as have my predecessors, that this symposium is being conducted on the traditional land of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam First Nations. This entire symposium has been a tremendous opportunity for all of us to learn, to network, to communicate, and to work together. I've realized, wandering the halls between sessions, that sometimes some of the work is also happening in the hallways. It's in the conversations, in fact, just as much, potentially, outside of the planned sessions as there are actually going on inside the sessions. And I hope this means that we will work to find ways to coordinate, to collaborate, and to share, and of course to find ways to take the necessary and immediate actions that are going to be required to restore our southern resident killer whale population. When I was first asked by our Prime Minister to be the Parliamentary Secretary for Fisheries and Oceans, I was humbled by the opportunity because I knew there was so much good work to be done. In fact, my very first trip as Parliamentary Secretary was to visit Dr. John Ford at his office in the Nanaimo biological station. We listened to orcas together. He shared with me a copy of his book, and he articulated the many challenges that face our southern residents. I was taken aback by his level of expertise, as I'm sure many of you were during his wonderful keynote address yesterday. His expertise that is built up over a career's worth of passion and hard work, and I want to thank Dr. Ford for taking the time to educate me about vessel noise, about the importance of Chinook salmon, the pervasive challenges that marine pollution pose in our environment, and more importantly, for continuing his work and sharing this information with anyone and everyone who shares his love for our beloved orcas. So thank you very much, Dr. Ford, wherever I'm sure you're here. Another presenter that I would like to thank is Carleen Thomas of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Carleen helped open the symposium on our second day, and also gave a wonderful presentation yesterday afternoon. Carleen and I first got to know each other a bit during the previous election, when the two of us had the opportunity to debate the merits of marijuana legalization with Dr. Kelly Leach. That's a whole other story. Since the election, I've also had the opportunity to work closely with Chief Maureen Thomas and members of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation on a number of files. The riding I represent falls within their traditional territory, and the relationships that we have just started to build has been one of the greatest privileges that I've enjoyed since becoming a member of Parliament. Yesterday, Carleen shared with us traditional knowledge and a concern that for too long, First Nations have been excluded from the conversation. Chief Maureen Thomas shared similar knowledge and concerns with me when we met to work on the Kinder Morgan pipeline together. Her teachings, courage, and friendship have been unbelievably influential for me personally. I don't really think she knows how much I appreciate the time that we spent together. In fact, it was those early experiences with Maureen that convinced me that over the last summer, the best work that I could be doing was to visit our various Indigenous communities throughout BC to better understand their knowledge, their history, their relationship with the environment, with the salmon, and of course with the killer whale. In fact, it was those very early discussions that guided me through a thought process when we first started talking about the Oceans Protection Plan. In my very first meeting with Minister LeBlanc, back when I was the Parliamentary Secretary for Science, not his Parliamentary Secretary, I was the Tsleil-Waututh's offer to work together and be a part of the solution that led me to present two asks of the Minister as it related to the $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan. The first was that we move beyond protection. I thought protection was too passive. It sounded like we were only trying to preserve what we currently have. Instead, I felt and still feel that we need to focus on restoration. We need to design the ocean we want, an ocean that our great-great-grandkids can be proud to inherit. My second thought was that our local First Nations, the people who have lived here the longest, and most symbiotically, or as Carlene described yesterday, with the lowest environmental footprint, that we must ensure that they are empowered to help us accomplish what they have done for thousands of years, and that is live in harmony with our marine environment. I think these same principles also apply to the restoration of our southern resident orca population. And if there was one message that I took away from our Indigenous panel yesterday that I'm going to take back with me to Ottawa, it is this. When it comes to our oceans and our southern resident killer whales, while we need to think and plan generationally, we must act immediately. For millennia, orcas have drawn upon an indefinite pool of wisdom and hardwired instincts that have been passed through the pod. Granny, who was the world's oldest known orca and the pod's knowledge keeper for over 100 years, would have shared her traditions on things like where to congregate in order to capitalize on the most plentiful Chinook runs. But those instincts are now failing them, not because they're flawed, but because the ecosystems in which they live are changing at a rate so quickly that orcas can't successfully adapt. And that is where we all come in. All of us gathered here for this symposium have a responsibility to work together and do whatever it takes to protect our southern resident killer whales and to help them recover. As the current environmental stewards of our oceans, we need to collectively do more to protect these iconic marine mammals and stop their dangerous decline before it is too late and cannot be reversed. The good news is that we're addressing this issue in an era that is defined by major investments in ocean science, an influx in marine technology, and a genuine spirit of collaboration. Regardless of what sector you work in, the people in this room represent some of the brightest minds in our oceans community. And on behalf of our Prime Minister and all Canadians, I thank each and every one of you for your work. And I want to ensure that every person in this room, that everything that has been communicated during this conference, before it and certainly after, will be taken into consideration and utilized. But I also don't want you to think that the federal government is sitting on our hands. We have been endeavoring to make significant changes in how we treat our marine environment. And this includes things like working on action plans for our endangered whale population, not just the southern residents, but the St. Lawrence beluga and the North Atlantic right whale. Increasing our marine protected areas from 1% to 10%, accounting for hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of ocean that will now be protected. Joining the UN Clean Seas campaign and working to fight plastic accumulation in our waters. Implementing the wild salmon policy and delivering on the Cohen Commission recommendations. Investing $197 million in new scientists at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, creating one of the largest hiring of scientists in the department's history. The investment of $1.5 billion in the Oceans Protection Plan, and last spring's $1.4 billion investment ensuring DFO can meet our core mandate. An oil and gas ban in the Arctic, an oil moratorium in the Northwest Coast. Forthcoming legislation that will restore protections across a wide variety of legislation, including habitat protections in the Fisheries Act. And I can list many more, and there is much more good work happening. In fact, on Monday, I'll be in the House of Commons working to pass Bill C-55, which will amend the Oceans Act to provide an even greater level of protection. So while there's still a tremendous amount of work to do, there's also a lot of good work being done that should make us all hopeful about our future. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all once again for participating in this symposium and the technical workshop on the first day. I hope you agree that it's been a valuable opportunity to learn from one another, share our expertise, and influence public policy. I look forward to working together in the months and years ahead and seeing what can be achieved when like-minded individuals join forces for a greater good. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of the West Coast, from Alaska to Washington, the United States, British Columbia, the Yukon, are counting on us to get this right, and I pledge to you today that our government is going to do everything that we can to make this happen. Thank you very much.